Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then please go ahead and subscribe. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this Farmhouse Farm Fresh pumpkin sign. It's really easy to make, so if you want to see how I made it, then continue watching. I'm using an SVG file that I cut out with my Silhouette Cameo onto Oramask 813, and I will leave a link down below to that SVG file. I am using a piece of 1 by 12 in the size of 11 1/4 by 12 inches. If you do not have a saw, then most of the time your lumber store that you purchase your wood from can cut it for you. I'm going to be using Minwax Wood Finish Stain in the color Provincial. I'm using Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Fluff. Also, I'm using Waverly paint in the colors Pumpkin, Elephant, and Moss. I will also be using a few different size grits of sandpaper, and this is to sand my wood, to distress it. Also, a few different paint brushes, a respirator mask, and safety glasses. I am staining my wood outside because it is well ventilated, and also I use gloves and I use a rag to wipe my stain on. Unfortunately, my video cut out while I was staining the wood, so I don't have that to show you. If you do want to see how I stain wood, then just leave a comment down below, but it is pretty easy. This part is where patience comes in because I do let my board dry for a couple days before I put my chalk paint on top of it. And this is only because when I put my stencil down on top of it and then I peel my stencil off, I do not want all of my chalk paint to come off because of the stain still being wet underneath. So now I'm taking my stained wood and I am putting a light coat of the white chalk paint on top of it. Also, I'm going to paint the sides of the board, that way it has a finished look. So now I'm going to distress my board, and I'm going to start off by putting on my respirator mask and my safety glasses. This way, when I sand off the paint, I am not going to be breathing in the paint dust or get the paint dust into my eyes. And I am using a few different size grit papers. Here I am using a 120, a 220, and a 400. This is basically what I had on hand. You don't want something that is too rough because you don't want it to scratch your board. You just want to take the paint off of the board. And I am running my sandpaper along the edges of my board, basically where there would be a lot of wear and tear. And you have to really rub if it's like a finer grit sandpaper, but just have at it until you get that paint off and then your wood below starts to show through. And how much you distress it really depends on your taste. So now I need to get my stencil onto my board, and I do use clear contact paper to do this. However, you can use transfer tape. I did not get this in a video because my camera, of course, let out. But I do have another video where I've made some signs where you can go and check that out in those videos. It is the same step. So I'm going to take my stencil and I'm going to put the sticky side down onto my board, and then I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to take my little squeegee and I'm going to go ahead and rub that stencil down onto my design. I need it to be really stuck, that way when I pull my transfer tape off, then my stencil will stay stuck on my board. After I pull the transfer tape off, I do take my squeegee and go ahead and run that over my stencil again, just to make sure that it's got a tight seal. Now comes the fun part, painting. I'm taking my white chalk paint and I'm putting a light coat over my stencil, and I'm doing this step so my other colors will not bleed on my sign. And I let the paint dry, and then I take my fine grit sandpaper and then I just go ahead and rub it over the areas that I painted. This is so whenever I pull my stencil up, it's not going to pull all the paint up at the same time. So here I am painting the rest of my design using the pumpkin color for my pumpkin, and I'm going to be using moss for my green leaves and the pumpkin color for the little berries on those leaves, and then I'm using elephant for the writing. And I did use truffle actually on the stem of the pumpkin and decided I didn't like that, so I went ahead and painted that over with elephant. Now is my most favorite part of all, and it is pulling my transfer tape off. And I do this when some of my paint is still wet, so I have to be careful not to get any of the wet paint onto my white portion of my board. And I just love how it's looking. The lines are crisp, and yeah, this is my favorite part. So now that I have pulled off majority of my stencil material, I still have to go into the fine details of my lettering and remove it there as well. And I am using a seam ripper to do this. You can use a dental pig, or they actually make specific tools to do this, but I think this seam ripper just works perfectly fine and it's really easy to use. And here's the finished sign. I really love how it turned out. And if you wanted to stress your letters a little bit more, what you could do is actually take your sandpaper and rub it along the stencil of your lettering before you pull your transfer tape off. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.